okay, this might be some really shitty advice. So, disclaimer, right? But again, back to experience is best when it's not your own. Careers are so short in this business to the point where loyalty shouldn't really matter. I know that sounds awful, but if you have a good opportunity with like a Star Yamaha and you are an Enzo Lopes, that's why I somewhat respect Enzo for kicking club to the curb. I'm sure it didn't go as smoothly, but you're only as good as your last race. So if you can perform the best with the best equipment, that's what you should do. Just like if you're a local guy and you're getting suspension for free from the local guy, but you're trying to get on the national circuit or the arena cross circuit or whatever, you may need to have another opportunity to get some better equipment. This is just an example here to where, yeah, you might piss off some people, but it's really, you're only as good as your last race. You need to take the opportunities that arise to you. So if Star Yamaha doesn't become the one all be all right now, then yeah, Levi needs to leave and move over there, because what have I talked about in the past? I've talked about factory parts where there's only so much money to go around, and therefore teams prioritize who they give their stuff to. Like right now, the perfect example is the progressive Twisted T Suzuki here. You've got Shane McElrath, who shouldn't be 15 places behind Kenny. Just shouldn't be. As far as talent-wise, you're talking about a 250 champion here. So for him, he's got lackluster equipment compared to Kenny. That's my speculation. And we've got Davey Millsaps once again saying as much on the last Gypsy Tale podcast here.
Okay. So then James wasn't doing very good. I was beating him. I was, what was I? Podium, in the top 3 in points, whatever it was. And then James left. And then I got James' bike.
Mm.
And then I started podiuming a lot.
Was it way better?
Way better.
Really?
Way better.
Fuck, like, if you can build one, just build 2.
Nope. Too expensive to build 2.
That's
so
retarded.
I got this.
That's absolutely.
I got this.
So my point with that is, do you guys believe that? And do you think that's potentially the paradigm shift at Star? Is Deegan comes in and with all of his clout and everything is like, hey, this is what I need. And so other riders like Levi Kitchen and them aren't getting as good of, I guess, maybe even support. It could just be even mechanics. It might not even have to be parts. So you leave. It's the same reason as to why I sincerely believe Chase Sexton went with a lackluster potential team, just because the opportunity with KTM, right? You had Webb leaving KTM for obvious reasons because they didn't like where the bike was going. And Honda, why didn't Sexton stay with Honda? Well, you had 2 other guys that were potentially taking the clout from him. So he needed to do what was best for him, not necessarily the brand loyalty.
Well, I'm going to give Shane a chance to talk, but the first thing I want to say is to validate your point. It's happening right now. Cooper Webb didn't like the bike. Chase Sexton didn't like the bike. Chase Sexton wants it changed. Chase Sexton's now got KYB internals on his WP forks. And that's a perfect example in real time based on what Davey just said. But Shane, share your thoughts. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it's still going on, but I think it's on a smaller scale, kind of like you were saying, Johnny, where it's like, mostly resources that are not the bike. So like with Star, it seems to me, I mean, I'm obviously not there firsthand, but from what I'm seeing, they have generally all the same parts and the bikes are outfitted with the same motors, everything's the same. Where it seemed like when I actually listened to that part of the podcast that you played, and it sounded like Davey was elaborating that he had better suspension, like actual components and things like that. So that was my understanding. But anyways, I think when like, for example, if we use the Deegan kitchen example, I feel like, say Deegan, he's got all the cameras on him. Everyone's, oh, you were 4/10 faster in this rut right here and this and that. And Levi's like, what about when I hit this triple, was it better coming in from this side? And like, oh, we didn't get that. Check the timing or whatever, so it could have been just something simple like that. Or maybe, the suspension techs are just giving one person a lot more time than the other, and they feel like, dude, I'm trying to dial in my suspension too. Like what's going on? So I think that there's a lot of that going on. And then I think that obviously, like we know with Kitchen, I think it was also a lot of just the loud fans and things that he didn't like. But I do also think that he probably wasn't getting the full attention that he wanted, from the team. Um, so I think we do have that going on. And then, now that he's on pro circuit, I feel like, like you said, they've just always been a four-man team. So he knows, well, I'm going to pretty much be one of the guys, if not the guy over there, especially since I'm going on this coast or whatever, most likely. So he felt like he had a good opportunity to get all the attention he deserved, and he wouldn't have to deal with all the outside noise too.
Johnny, something to think about, and this is going to sound very harsh, but I hope everybody takes it with a grain of salt. One of the things that's been kind of a trend over the last 5 years is, what is the rider bringing to the team? I guess Kenny is probably the best example of it, because you look at, if I'm not mistaken, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Roxon bring in Progressive Insurance, and a lot of those big sponsors came over because Kenny was coming there. It's very similar to like what they do in car racing. If you look at some of these big Formula One race cars, Indy cars, these type teams. So I was speaking with Jeff Ward the year that he got third at Indy 500. Yes, he had proven he had the talent to drive a car, but the discussion is, hey, we'll put you in a car if you bring this amount of money so that we can go racing. And if you think about how much money did Roxon bring into that HEP team, whether it's Progressive and all the different sponsors that are there, his own Red Bull, Fox, the Oakley, the whole 9 yards. I think he's now a Fox goggle guy. But to the point of, and I don't mind saying this publicly, we are negotiating with 3 MXGP teams where we want to be a feeder to be able to provide them up and coming riders in the 125 classes, what they refer to it in Europe. So talking with them straight up, they're like, all right, this is how much money it's going to cost you to put that rider on our team. They're literally emulating what the race car industry is doing, which I think is fascinating, because it's no bullshit, no games, no nothing. It's like, this is what it's going to cost us. This is what it's going to cost you. And if you can give us a rider. And so that's what we're trying to do, is do things a little bit differently over here, where we as a company are going to fund a young rider for 3 to 4 years here stateside, with the idea of putting them into a placement. We're going to be sending them over to the UK and working with Richard McEwen, do some British rounds, do some Scottish rounds, get used to living in some very cold, wet conditions. Can you cut the mustard? Do that for 3 or 4 months, come back home. If you like it, and we can get a lot of statistical data into the MXGP team's hands, now we can start looking at Husqvarna, Kawasaki, some of these other teams that are over there, and say, hey, I have cultivated a rider to hand them off to you, but I already understand it's going to cost me as a company X amount of dollars. So if I can offset the cost of the families to go over there, I can then provide a feeder program for these teams. Every one of them that I've spoken to has embraced the idea. But what I think is interesting is, where did their model come from? Race cars. Bring the money and we'll go racing. Obviously, the talent has to be there. And that's what I was talking to with the team managers. They're not just going to take the money and just throw somebody underneath the awning. It's like, prove to me they're physically capable. Show me they've got the mental toughness, and then we'll talk. So if you look at Kenny and the money that he's bringing into that team, not, like you say, no disrespect to McElrath or Chisholm, but what was McElrath? He's been like in the top 5 in the main event around the first turn, I think 4 times already this year. Johnny, you're better with the statistics than I am. But like you said, he doesn't stay there. He gets back outside the top 10 by the end of the race. Is that an equipment issue? I mean, nobody would say that McElrath is not good on a dirt bike. He's a champion. But I think it does validate, like you're saying, better parts, but it's also a byproduct of somebody bringing the money in to pay for those parts as well. Because we heard a lot about Kenny going back and forth with that suspension. I can't imagine how much just getting that set up cost Kenny.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe what question is it Kenny or is it HEP? I guess that's the big question.
Dude, a HEP. I always think about like the like marijuana stuff. For some reason, it's just burned into my head. Maybe I'm just still
no pun intended. Boom.
Yeah.